salatu salam ala Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Dr. Stef Keris and I would like to invite you to our next episode, an exciting journey through our history, our past, our empires, our dynasties. SubhanAllah, it is really amazing to see what Muslims have done in the past and the problems that they dealt with each other and with other people as well. And again, as I keep saying also in lectures, do not think that Muslims were not people, they were not angels, they were just normal people. Don't think that they were not people. They were just normal people, they were not angels, and many of them were very pragmatic in their way of thinking. Many of them were greedy. Some of them wanted power, wanted the throne and the might. So you will find a lot of things that might have been very un-Islamic actually, and that we cannot support nowadays, and we as Muslims cannot agree with what happened in certain periods of times with certain rulers and so on and so on. Yes, that's simply how it is. But we have to try to look at history from the historical perspective. We have to look at what really happened in reality and not hide behind facts that might not be facts just because we don't want to accept them. We should not hide behind certain elements that might disturb us and our ideology. Okay? We clearly should see the difference between Islam as our deen and Islamic history as history. And this topic today is going to look into the slave dynasty of the Mamluks. And the Mamluks were indeed a slave dynasty, mainly in Egypt, but Mamluks were also the slaves called wherever they were actually. There were many slaves taken especially from the Caucasus, so the southern region of Russia nowadays, for example, who became military soldiers, military slaves. Okay, and you will find them all over the Muslim world. You will find them under the dynasty of the Ayyubids. So this video is sponsored by the Muqaddimah program. For nearly 7 centuries, Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah has been read and studied by scholars and students of history, sociology, politics and economics as the single most authoritative and astounding work of classical scholarship in the field of history. Embark on an enlightening educational venture led by Muslim scholars and teachers delving into Islamic history, sociology, economics and beyond. Engage with cutting-edge learning cues and multimedia components, allowing for a deeper understanding of the topics. Distinguish between the lies and the truths of the narratives told, between reliable and unreliable sources. Equip yourself with the skills to conduct deep research and build confidence to combat Islamophobia. Come and strengthen your Muslim identity today. Grab the course in the video description. The very important dynasty that played an important role in Egypt as well as in the Middle East. Then the Abbasids, of course, very important dynasty that we mentioned before. The Shiite Fatimids as well, and so on and so on. So you will find this type of slave soldiers and Mamluks all over the Muslim world amongst many dynasties, Muslim dynasties. Because people talk very often about the Ottomans, that they had the Janissary army, that means a Muslim army, which was exactly the same idea, who were enslaved Balkan Christian children. Okay? So nothing new there, what the Ottomans did later. That's something that happened even before the Ottomans, okay? So the slave soldiers were of non-Muslim, Mongol or Turkish origin. And that's why it said, for example, that when the Mamluk dynasty takes over in Egypt, which was indeed a slave dynasty, they were of Turkish origin and they were the ones who actually lead Egypt further and get more a Turkic culture than they had an Arabic before. They were given special training in military and administrative issues, the same that happened later with the Janissaries under the Ottomans. Many developed a career, even became army commanders, leaders even, founders of entire dynasties, subhanAllah. Extremely important to see, right? So For example, also the slave dynasty of the Delhi Sultanate, also another slave dynasty that was founded by Qutb ad-Din Aibak in India. Okay, again another slave dynasty. So the Mamluks and the slaves were not only the ones who developed dynasties in North Africa and in Egypt, but also in other places such as in India and later also under the Ottoman rule. The Abbasids, the Fatimids and the Ayyubids used to employ Mamluks from the area to the north of the Black Sea. That means southern Russia and nowadays the country of Ukraine. Inhabited mainly by the Kipchaks, that was a nomadic and shamanic Turkic people. So these were Turkic people who hadn't accepted Islam yet. Although some of the Kipchaks actually later is said, especially once moved towards Eastern Europe, some of them had Muslims in between. Okay. Due to poverty, they would sell their children to slave dealers. Okay, so they would make money with that, meaning the slave dealers would make money of them, of course, and it was nothing else but business for them. Also, they took Mamluks from the Caucasus region, inhabited by non-Turkic Circassians and Georgians. Okay, so again, Russian people, nowadays Georgia is part of, well, it is an independent country, but the Circassians are part of Russia, as well as the southern Russia, the southern area of Russia, and the Ukraine, the country of Ukraine, Ukrainians who are not part of Russia anymore, as they were before, part of the Soviet Union. After the arrival in Egypt, they would receive special Islamic education and then a military training. For example, horse riding, archery, which is part of the Sunnah, by the way, just to know that Rasulullah spoke highly about these things, that we should raise our children knowing how to do horse riding and how to use archery, how to be able to be real soldiers, basically. They became the elite guards, the royal slaves of the Sultan, okay? The Al-Mamalik al-Sultaniya, as they were called. They were freed upon graduation with diploma, by the way, a very important thing, because when people speak about slavery, they straight away they think about the slaves in America or the slaves in Europe who did not have the opportunities that these slaves had. They were, once they had their education, and then once they were even getting a diploma for graduating, they were freed. So they became full soldiers, independent, and became members of the fraternity of Mamluks. Okay? So they became brothers in arms of each other. It was a family, basically, for them, and were still loyal to their former masters as if it was their father. And indeed, they treated them like their children, actually. So, although they were free, they had a diploma, they were graduated, basically, they were loyal to their masters, former masters. The Sultan himself actually was a Mamluk who became a Sultan, and then he would choose his direct successors amongst them. Okay? In Egypt, there are two different types of Mamluks. Between 1250 and 1382, they were called the Bahriya Mamluks. Bahriya, whereas between 1382 and 1517, towards the end of Mamluk rule, these were the Burjiya Mamluks. Okay? Under the Ayyubids, so under Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, we all know him, Salahuddin, he sets up his own dynasty between 1169 and 1260 and destroys, gets rid of the Shiite Fatimids. Okay, we owe him a lot, basically, mashallah. He was somebody who restored Sunni power in Egypt and restores Sunnism, the Sunni power again. The Ayyubid rulers had mainly Kipchak Mamluks as their bodyguards, who turned against the Sultan and killed him, so allowing the ones they wanted on the throne. So what happened now? The Mamluks turned against their own sultans, turned against their rulers, the slaves turned against their rulers, and decide who rules and who doesn't rule. Okay? That makes them state within a state, subhanAllah. Very important point to see. By 1258, as we know, the massive attack of the Mongols on Baghdad destroyed the Abbasid rule, and the Mamluks actually gained power, because now, just 2 years later, in 1260, the Mamluks come together with Muslim Mongols, mashallah. Very important to see, and we learn something out of this. This is a lesson we learn here. There were Mongols who accepted the deen, became Muslims, and they realized and recognized in the Mamluks and in other Muslims their brethren, their brothers in Islam, whereas their blood brothers, own Mongols, were not brothers anymore because they were not Muslims. And they fought against them together with the Mamluks, and they won in the famous battle of Ain Jalut, which is nowadays in Palestine. This famous battle got rid of the Mongols, basically. And the Mamluks gained power and become very strong. Sultan Qutuz with the army commander Baibars were the big victors. What happens then? Baibars kills Qutuz and becomes the new Mamluk Sultan of Egypt. Baibars is a very important name, and we need to know about him. We're not going too deep into him, but I would like to give you an idea of this person. Between 1260 and 1277 was his reign, and he was the true founder of the Mamluk dynasty in Egypt. He unites Egypt and Syria and gets rid of the Crusaders at last, strengthens his defenses by repairing the castles and increasing the army and naval vessels. Develops a very effective postal system. Again, we mentioned it before, under the Umayyads, the postal system was developed under the Umayyads, but now the Mamluks develop it even further, using pigeons, for example, as well. He conquers Ayyubi territory, so countries such as Egypt, Palestine, and Syria for the Mamluks. He invades Ilkhanate territory on the other side, which is basically Persia, in eastern Turkey as well, and defeated a combined Seljuk-Mongol army, defeating the Shiite Ismailis. Okay? So again, the Mamluks, we owe them a lot. We owe them really a lot. On the one hand, they had their intrigues and their problems amongst themselves. But if we look at Baibars, we see, for example, how important he was for Sunni rule and how important his fights and battles were against the Shiites in the east and in the south as well. In 1262, the Abbasid caliphs fled Baghdad from 1258. They were now reinstalled by Baibars. So Baibars allows the refugees, the ones who fled in 1258 from the Mongol rule, from the Mongols in 1258 in Baghdad, he allows them to come to power, allows Al-Hakim I to become the next Abbasid ruler, and gives him the title Universal Sultan of Islam. The Universal Sultan of Islam. Baibar's son Baraka Khan becomes his successor after his death in 1277. So the Abbasid Caliph, that's where the next period of the Abbasids start, but under Mamluk rule basically. Baibars has become the national hero of Egypt and Syria, the second Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, as he is called, in these countries, in Syria and in Egypt. Again, we see that once Egypt and Syria were united, were once part of the mighty Ummah, and indeed, and nowadays we cannot imagine that anymore. We cannot imagine. I cannot imagine seeing Egypt and Syria being as one country. Baraka Khan's father-in-law, Kalawun, deposes Baraka in 1279, being the first Mamluk ruler to recruit Mamluks from the Caucasus. These were the Circassian Mamluks, who formed the Burji Dynasty, as I mentioned before. Between 1382 and 1517, the new dynasty of Mamluks develops, the Burji Dynasty, who are mainly people from the Caucasus area, the Circassian Mamluks. So the Bahriya Mamluks, the ones before them, were mainly Kipchak Turkic of origin, whereas the Burjiya now were mainly of Circassian origin. And that's the reason, for example, you can clearly see that why you will find in the Middle East, in Egypt or in Jordan or in many countries of the Middle East, you'll find quite some white-looking, Russian, European-looking people who you say don't really fit to Egyptian society or Egyptian people, or Syrian people at all, or Jordanian people or whatever. They look very European, very Russian. That's exactly what they are. They are actually Russian rather. Now, what happens then, of course, Cairo becomes the city of Islam, becomes the city, the strongest city ever, the most important one, and flourishes more than Baghdad and Damascus and all the other cities which have actually all left the culture that they had before, or the power that they had before. I'd rather say that, the might and the power that they had before. Dar al Islam becomes Cairo, okay? And Ibn Khaldun mentions it again very often in his Muqaddimah. He calls it even the center of the world. He calls Cairo the center of the world. Without a doubt, Cairo played and still plays a very important role for Islam and for the Arab world mainly. We should not forget that Egypt is the biggest Arab country, the largest Arab country, and plays a very important role. Again, if you want to know more about these different dynasties and the rulers and the Mamluks and all the differences that we had there, take a look at our courses. You can find them online. And, well, just sign up for them and see you then, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
For almost 7 centuries, the Muqaddimah has been widely regarded as the earliest and most authoritative and seminal text in the fields of sociology and history, outlining the core principles and methods needed to evaluate and convey history with a more objective and critical eye. Its celebrated author, Ibn Khaldun, pioneered a revolutionary approach to the study of history and is considered by some historians to be one of the most influential thinkers in his field. Now, for the very first time, students of Islamic history will have the rare and unique opportunity to study this monumental and classical work of genius under the tutelage and guidance of experts in the field of research and education. We offer a wide and varied range of learning experiences as part of the program, with options for students to participate in person during our on-site lessons in London or remotely via our private and secured live streaming platform. Classes are delivered on a fortnightly basis, and all students enrolling onto the program shall receive a complete learning resource pack, including coursebooks, timetables, and admission onto the online student portal. The annual program is available to students as a certificate or a diploma package, with varying subjects and module components, as well as a practical assessment unit that will culminate in the launch of student-led history projects and publications, following a panel presentation before a group of assessors. This is a unique opportunity to discover and immerse yourself into the world of Islamic historiography under the tutelage and guidance of experts who will assist you in acquiring the core skills and competencies necessary to conduct your own research and launch your own initiatives. To find out more about the Muqaddimah program or to enlist yourself onto this unique and fantastic learning journey, please visit our website at www.almuqaddimah.com, where you will be able to download our program prospectus, register your interest by submitting an application directly via the online enrollment form.